So, Anthony, I wanted to bring you back to our private group that is focused on putting the kind of things that you were talking about into practice in daily life. And there, just if you would visit with us in that group for just a few minutes, and anything that you've discovered that is encouraging as far as dealing with a really challenging and sometimes very negative outer environment, and people who don't have everybody's benefit in mind so much. In other words, the spirit behind a lot of the modern technology, which is surveillance and control and damage instead of do no harm. What if anything that you want to share that is useful in keeping yourself from getting into the same mentality, and then how to use negatively originating technologies for benefit?
Okay.
Stuff like that.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me into the group. It's
sure.
I'll lead off by saying, but not to discount, but I'll lead off by saying, I look at things from a Christian perspective, and I deal with life through my faith. But I'm not here to preach, so I'm not going to preach.
Okay.
And that is that from a very practical standpoint, I try to force myself, and this is consciously because I have a short temper.
Okay.
And that's what I struggle with, is you could call them anger issues in the extreme, but just the everyday irritability. And I think when we see what's going on in the world around us with technologies and crowded city environments, and if you live in the country and have to go into the city and encounter, the population density, that irritability, and I experience that irritability and that short-temperedness. And I think by design, the technologies that we have today are doing two things. It's a double-edged sword. We discussed this earlier in the live stream, but they are trying to set up technology as a solution to make things more convenient.
Yeah.
But the double-edged sword to that is they make things inconvenient on purpose. They make things difficult in society. Some of that is the fear-based structure, but a lot of it is creating, through that Hegelian dialectic that we often talk about, the problem, reaction, solution. They create these problems and then they offer a solution through technology. And technology is not the answer. The answer is ourselves, starting with ourselves. And so with my irritability in dealing with technology that is temperamental, like computer systems, and as a broadcaster, frequently having technical issues that I have to address, that can irritate. If I'm driving into a city and dealing with traffic and people, that irritability comes. But it's not the fault of the people in the city. It's not the fault of the computer system that's acting up. It's how I'm perceiving it and how I choose to deal with it. And so for me, as a personality that is very direct and very take action oriented, the action for me is to say, no, stop. Stop what you're doing in your head. Stop the way you're thinking. Interrupt that pattern of thinking and consciously say to myself, I'm not going to let that person do that to me. I'm not going to let those traffic patterns do that to me, or my computer do that to me. I am not going to allow myself to become angry, because that anger, I know, is self-destructive. And I know from a physiological standpoint, it's destructive to my physical mind as well. So it's that purposeful choice in how I deal with life, whether it's anger management, irritability, whatever, temperament, or whether I'm going to do something else in life. Taking deliberate, critical thinking steps. Critical thinking means observing, analyzing, breaking it down, understanding its cause and effect, recognizing the effect, and taking control of that effect. So we take back the control, starting with ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And it's another way of saying that stress is not the circumstances and people and crazy things happening around you. It's your reaction to them.
Yes, I would agree with that. Because who's responsible for my behavior? Me.
Yeah, that's right. Free will.
You know, and I often pick on the analogy of driving in the cities because I've been fortunate enough to be able to move out of the city to a small town. But boy, I see the behavior. I'm an observer like you, and I see the behavior of people, especially driving. And it's dog eat dog.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you change lanes. I'm not going to let you have that lane, whatever it is.
Right.
Or even pedestrians who seem to think that they own the road when they're crossing the street. You know, this brings up all of this road rage in people. And yet we see that people are fighting amongst each other, and they've made the decision to fight rather than cooperate.
Yeah. Yeah. They've taken the suggestion because the rulers, I think, want us to all be fighting and terrified of each other because we're no threat to their agenda at that point. In fact, we're probably helping it to happen.
I think we are helping in that negative response. We are helping with their agenda, and I do think that in the bigger picture, when I speak to my audiences, I try to put the big picture in a tangible form of 30,000 foot elevation. Mm-hmm. We're going to go to 30,000 feet. We're going to look at what's going on. And so if we're at 30,000 feet and we're looking at, well, yeah, they've got us fighting amongst ourselves, but what's the purpose of the fight?
Right.
Well, it's to distract us from what they're doing to control us and to destroy us.
Yeah.
If we're fighting with each other, left and right paradigm, or however you want to apply that paradigm, then we're not critically thinking about the people that are influencing us in the bigger picture, what actions they're taking against us.
Yeah. And even on a subtle level, if you get into the fighting and fear mentality, it puts you in a perfect receptivity state for the negative programming that they're trying to sink into you.
Absolutely it does. Right. Because you're not thinking with the prefrontal cortex at that point. You're thinking instinctively.
Yeah.
And that's where they want to keep you, in that brainstem level of autonomic nervous system, of thinking in terms of fight or flight through the fear. And someone who's irritating you is putting you in a type of fear state when they put you into an anger state.
Yeah, it's like all the negative emotions mask fear in a way, right?
They do, because you're not thinking of it as a loss of control over your own thoughts. If you perceive things as, I'm losing control of my own decision-making process, if I'm not taking on that direct action to think differently, then I'm being influenced and I'm being controlled.
Right. So if you don't want to be in that mind state, emotional state, rather than just thinking, I'm not going to be in this state, and focusing on the state that you don't want to be in, instead of that, what state would you say you do want to be in?
Well, you want to shift your mindset over to something that is more positive. In other words, instead of reacting to the traffic situation in the city, as our example that we're kind of flowing with here, what's my goal for the day? Am I going to meet my wife for lunch? Am I going to pick up my kids at school? Am I going to the grocery store? Or what are we planning? Thinking of those goals that are positive in your life that you're trying to achieve. Everything else in between is just stuff that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to maneuver through. But you're thinking about those positive goals, those positive things you're trying to achieve in your daily walk, your daily activities.
Right.
One of the trite phrases is, pay it forward kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that does work, but, you get out of the car at the grocery store and you're angry because you had to fight for a parking spot. You had to fight to get to the grocery store, right?
Right.
And so the first person you encounter in the grocery store, if you want to take a different direction, is maybe that little lady who's struggling with her shopping cart could use some, use a hand.
Right.
Or
right.
the cashier who's just working her tail off with customer after customer, and you purposely are nice to her, despite the fact that you're angry about how you got to the grocery store.
So that changes the anger experience immediately, right?
It does. And you know what? I think the audience can relate, of course, to this, and that is how often when you are deliberately, I don't mean in an overt way, but you're just genuinely, intuitively nice to someone, and you're appreciative to the checker in the grocery store example.
Right.
That she's there and she's doing a diligent job and she's trying her best, and you just acknowledge it in whatever way you do. You acknowledge it, and she is shocked.
Yeah, exactly. Because usually people, if they're nice to anybody, it's to somebody who looks like they're already doing great, and they kind of want to associate with somebody like that. But if you walk up to somebody who's obviously really disheveled and not doing great and really upset and everything, and be nice to them, it's a different experience.
It changes the whole day for that person. Yeah. And it changes your whole day because you deliberately stepped out, not in a flowery way, just in a genuine way. Being nice to someone helps you too. So if you got to be selfish about this, be nice to people so that it helps you. I mean, you could be selfish if you want.
Yeah. I don't think anybody has ever done anything not selfish. It's just the people who really understand, like your entanglement principle, they try to help anybody else. They're being selfish. And it's not a bad thing, because everybody's fate is together.
I agree with that. We're helping each other out. If I help myself, I'm helping you.
Yeah.
If I help myself to be a better person and start with and be responsible for myself. And folks, I am far from perfect, so I'm not preaching here. I'm just saying from personal experience that it works better if you take responsibility for how you think and then how you treat someone, because you're genuine with them, because you started with yourself.
Yeah. It's the only place to start. Yeah. And the only place to stay and do the whole project, actually.
Until God says otherwise.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're going to be with yourself even when you're not in this lifetime anymore.
That's right.
Right. So, but the nice thing is you can do whatever you want from there. So,
in the live stream, we talked a little bit about, at the physiological scale in the brain, but I'll just very quickly say, when we consciously make an effort to think positively, to think, and I sound like the guy who wrote the book about positive thinking, but when we force ourselves to focus on positive goals, positive methods of behaving, how we interact with our wife, our loved ones, when you really stop and think about it in a practical sense, I mean really practical, just saying the next words that come out of my mouth are just going to be nice words. And I'm going to force myself to do that.
Yeah.
What we're doing at the dendrite level that connect our neurons is we're building dendrite connections that are strong, that have integrity, that will remain, and they hold positive memories. Our dendrites hold our memories along with the neurons. And therefore, if you have to be practical and mechanical about it, say, I'm going to build positive dendrites today. I mean, it sounds absurd, but literally, physiologically, our mind causes a response to build dendrites. You can build destructive ones, or you can build positive, enhancing ones. And over a period of time, you begin to actually feel stronger, both in your mind and physically, because you're reinforcing those proper dendrite connections. And you're also raising your IQ. You're getting smarter by doing that. That's astounding.
Yeah, it is incredible. And then whether you think life is really terrible or really beautiful, you make either one come true.
And to think to the terrible is actually destroying our minds. And it's lowering our IQ. It reduces your ability to think critically.
Right. And the positive one actually becomes fun.
It is. It brings humor into your life because you see the absurdity of it all. At least that's how I see it. It's the absurdity of the things that used to upset me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you go to 30,000 feet and you just kind of see this whole game. You see the chessboard. You realize, hey, I'm one of those pieces on the chessboard, and I realize it's a game. But if you don't go to 30,000 feet and see the bigger picture of life, you don't even realize that there's a game board. You don't even know there's a game, much less know that you're a pawn in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really being out of touch when you're in the game and you don't even know there's a game happening.
Exactly. And that's where fear puts you. That's where getting angry puts you. It keeps you in that little compartmentalized box where you really can't think outside the box. You can't get up to 30,000 feet and see the big perspective on life.
Right. Because you've already set the intent to make everything be bad.
Self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
So if I go in the grocery store and I'm rude to people in the grocery store, how are they going to act towards me?
Exactly. Then you're going to figure out you were right. They are terrible.
That's right. And I just grumble and go off into the parking lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's taken me a long time. I shared with you earlier, I'm 65 years old, but it's taken me, 65 years to get to the point where I can get to 30,000 feet and see the game. And that's where you see the absurdity of it. And that's when you start to laugh at it. And you go, you can't instill fear in me. It's a game. And you guys are jokers. I'm sorry, but you don't have that much power and control over me because I'm not going to let you have it. Yeah. So take your best shot, dude. But, you're not going to get it. So I'll share a little something with I didn't mention this to you before, but I spent 27 years. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
I spent 27 years in Oakland, California as a paramedic and then retired out of that. Mm-hmm. And I used to have a little saying on the street in dealing with combative people. And your audience, I don't think, are they seeing the video or are they just hearing audio on this?
You got video too.
Okay, well, I'll give you this. The finger to the chin.
Yeah.
All right? Take your best shot. Come on. And I never had anybody take me up on it.
That's really interesting. Wow.
It takes the wind out of their sails. I've had people, you can appreciate in a high crime area who are very combative.
Yeah.
And my way of diffusing it, taking the wind out of their sails, was just that. Come on. You want it? You want it? Come on. And it sounds like, hey, Mr. Macho, he's playing games out on the street. But when you apply that to sort of this figurative body that is controlling humanity at this point, the powers that be.
Right.
That's my attitude towards them is, come on, give it your best shot. Now, from a Christian perspective, I know I have a greater power than they do. And that's as far as I'm going to go on that tangent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's a beautiful example. So, okay.
No reason to be fearful of a bully.
No, that's reading your part of the script in the play, and they like that. So, what you were doing is just going off script. Say, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to be terrified? And building up the same bad energy and everything. If you don't do that, it's hard to have a fight with one person.
It really is. And we start with ourselves, and if we fight within our own head, if we're always struggling with ourselves, then we don't have the ability to sort of diffuse things that come at us in life. And, I mentioned that I used to teach a class that was for law enforcement, and I learned it from the law enforcement arena, and it was called Diffusing Assaultive Behavior. And it was all about using your mouth. Well, if you're going to use your mouth, you better engage the mind first.
Mm-hmm. That'd be good.
And that's really, I think, a good way of dealing with life is start with your mind and then outwardly your behavior comes from there.
Yeah, whatever really your state, whatever your state, emotional and mental state are, is going to be conveyed like using your words as a carrier wave, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So, well, anyway, I really learned a lot from that, and I have plenty to absorb, and hopefully everybody does too. And thanks for sharing it with us. I appreciate it.
Sure. My pleasure. It's always nice talking with you, Richard.
Yeah.